So hello everyone, and welcome to the 14th Byte-Size Talk. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker today, Zandra Fagernäs from the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History in Germany. She will tell us how the graphics for NF Core Eager were created and provide us with tips on how to make these ourselves. If you have any questions for Zandra during the talk, please keep them coming through the chat box, either on Zoom or on YouTube, and I will relay them across at the end of the talk, or continue the discussion on the Byte-Size Slack channel and see where that leads. So let's begin. Over to you, Zandra.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I want to start off by saying thank you for inviting me to give this talk. It's very exciting. So as Renuka mentioned, this will not really be a talk where I advise you how to do illustrations, seeing as I'm not an illustrator. So I'm not qualified to do that, but I will be going through what we did for the NF Core Eager pipeline and why we made the specific choices that we did. But to start off, who am I actually? I'm a PhD student at MPI-SHH, as was mentioned, and I work with biomolecules in archaeological dental calculus. Much more comfortable with the wet lab than bioinformatics, so I'm basically the end user of the pipelines that you guys are creating. And the reason why I'm here is because I made the graphics for the NF Core Eager pipeline. But if I'm not an illustrator, what are actually then my qualifications even for doing the illustrations for Eager? Well, once upon a time, about 4 years ago, I took a 2-hour class in illustration, which resulted in a coloring book. My mom and grandma are really good illustrators. I'm not an artist whatsoever, but maybe I have some sort of arts in my blood. I also run a Twitter page about how it is to work in an ancient biomolecules lab, to these funny little illustrations that about 700 people in the world find funny because they do the same thing. And I guess the main qualification why I did the illustrations for Eager is that I shared an office with James at the time. And James is one of the main driving forces behind Eager. So why did we choose to do so much different graphics for Eager? Well, I can tell you that as an end user who is more comfortable in the wet lab, software docs can be a little bit boring at times if it's just a very long readme.txt with a lots of text in different paragraphs. I can promise you I will stop reading after the second one and then just fish out whatever tidbits I need information about. It can also be super intimidating, especially if you're a new person entering the world of bioinformatics and trying to figure it out on your own. And big pipelines can be really hard to understand if they are, for example, like Eager that have very many different components. Understanding what goes in and what comes out and what happens in the different parts can be difficult. So this is why the developers of Eager got me involved to try and spend a little bit more time on making illustrations for the documentation. And our process for making the graphics was that me and James were largely working together. He would send me sketches like this one that I'm showing here about what he would expect to be in the figure. And then I spent about half an hour trying to understand what James wrote, because this is his handwriting. It's not his toddler, it's him. And then also looking at the actual figures that are outputted from Eager, I would take it and make it into some sort of a simplified cutesy figure. And I think our strength here was that James was very involved in writing the pipeline and wanted all the information that is necessary in there and wanted to explain all the different bits, whereas I was not involved in writing the pipeline and I was just focusing on making the figures cute and clear and easy to understand. And then by very many iterations back and forth of tiny little changes, we ended up somewhere in the middle with all the important information for the figures, but still simple and easy to understand figures. So for Eager, we decided to make 2 different types of figures with different purposes. So the first ones I'll go through are figures for understanding the results. And then the second ones are different kinds of pipeline diagrams. So for the figures in the docs, I'm showing here a figure that we have in our manuscript where panel A is the actual output from multi-QC, and then panel B is the adaptation that we did of the FastQC results for the documentation. So you can see that we wanted to make them very simple. There's a lot of information that is deleted that is there in the original figure, but is not necessary for just an illustration. We wanted to make them a little bit cuter, which you can see in that we chose slightly brighter colors and a very friendly type of text, and in general, very soft lines. We wanted them to be a bit informative, but like I mentioned, we did not want to put all the information in there because then we would need to write a book instead of just doing a few different figures. And the main purpose of this was to lower the bar, to just get everyone to give it a shot at running the pipeline on their own. And actually what you can't see here in this figure, but you can see in the docs, is that they are all under a CC BY license, which means that people can actually use them for their own purposes too. And then the second part is different pipeline diagrams. And I'm showing here the main overview of the entire NF4 eager pipeline. Also there, we wanted to make it very simple, but a little bit more informative than the software docs are, just because you actually need to have all the information in here. And yeah, you can see we have the different inputs marked by these different icons in square boxes to differentiate them from the pipeline elements, and same with the outputs at the end. And we grouped the different elements of the pipeline into these blocks in a way that makes sense for people running ancient DNA analysis. So you can easily see what happens after you put in your FASTQ file, for example, and what the different steps will be and which choices you can make at which steps. And the colors here indicate what is a new part when compared to the old eager pipeline and what is not. And one important thing to mention here is that this is not just completely made up from my own head. Immediately at the beginning, James mentioned that he really likes the pipeline diagram from Sarek. So I went in and looked at it, and indeed, this is beautiful. So we picked out some elements that we like. So that is what I would suggest for anyone to do who wants to make a diagram of their pipeline. Just Google and look around. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can just pick out things that you like and things that you don't like from the different diagrams and adapt it into your own. And then what am I actually doing this with? I prefer to use the software Inkscape instead of, for example, Adobe Illustrator, as very many use, mainly because it is free and it is very intuitive. At least for me, it's easy to understand how to do different things. It didn't take a long time for me to learn how to illustrate. And also, probably the main selling point of this software is how much online presence there is from people using it. Basically, anything you want to do, you can just Google it, and you will find 5 YouTube videos and 3 blog posts about how to do it, which is very helpful when you're trying to learn different things. And finally, I also wanted to mention color schemes, which is something that is often quite intimidating to people, having to pick from all the colors in the world, which ones should I use in my particular figure. So my suggestions would be to keep it as simple as possible. Often just 2 different colors is enough. And if you're doing, for example, NF core illustrations, just pick the colors from the logo. That's really easy, as you probably will use the logo in the figure as well. So then you just need to pick the same color and you're not increasing the amount of colors at all. And just to illustrate what too many colors will do, I still am using only colors from the NF Core Eager logo there, but I've chosen to also put blue for the ones that were parts that were in the old pipeline as well. The different inputs are yellow, the arrows are red, so you can see them more. So hopefully what you can see from this is that you can do more colors, but your eyes can't focus on anything anymore, and you run the risk of just inducing a migraine to people trying to read your pipeline. And if you're wondering about how do I know if colors work together or not, I would suggest to just Google different color schemes. There are tons of them online, and you can pick out also ones that are safe for red-green colorblind if it's necessary to be able to differentiate the colors in your pipeline or in your figure. And yeah, it's really easy to find stuff from there. You can just pick colors from them, and you don't need to worry about will this actually look good or not. And finally, I wanted to mention that you are not alone in this. We definitely pull a lot from the community to get assistance for our eager figures. So in the link that I have here, you can find, for example, the NF Core logo. So you don't need to try to cut it out from a previous logo. You can find the font that is generally used and the colors that are in the logo. You can find examples of previous pipelines and previous figures. And you can also find different components, like, for example, the little FASTQ and TSV icons that I used earlier. And also, you can always ask questions in the newly formed graphics channel on Slack. It is full of people who are very happy to give their opinions about your figures. So that was a very short talk, but hopefully I have now shown that anyone can at least try to do illustrations. You do not need to be a professional designer or illustrator for this. You can just give it a shot, and hopefully you manage to make something pretty for your pipeline to make it a bit more easily understandable and cute. And thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks for the talk, Zandra. That's a really wonderful way to level the playing field for new users to get them on board with the pipelines. As Phil pointed out in the chat, we collect all the stuff that Zandra mentioned, and Zandra also talked about it in the final slide. So the link is in the chat. You can find where all this information has been collected for NF Core.
Good.
And does anyone have any questions? Please put them in the chat and I will read them out to you. And if Phil has any, Phil, if you'd like to add something, you seem very enthusiastic in the chat. Maybe you can unmute yourself.
No, that was a great talk. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. Just one question. I put it in the chat, Renuka. You can pass it on.
All right. So he asks you whether you could describe the process for the London Underground image.
Well, unfortunately, I cannot. That is the single figure of Eager that was made by James. So maybe James wants to describe it instead if he is here.
I am indeed here. The process for the Underground image. I always thought that sort of metro maps were always quite clear for describing flows of various things. And given that the Eager pipeline has multiple different types of analysis you can do with it, so there's different sort of target organisms or analysis that you typically want to do. So I also needed something which could represent that quite easily. And so that was basically the reason why I did that. And then the process was essentially a lot of, how to describe it? Connecting the dots. So obviously you can, from the NF Core, the Nextflow DAG diagrams, you can get sort of those workflows where all your data is going at various points, but that's very complicated. So it was sort of firstly looking at that and using my knowledge of how the pipeline works to condense it down into the main steps which each person would typically go through to run the analysis, then sorting that out in a clear order. So I think what I did originally was put all the points of all the stations, which is each tool, on the page in a somewhat logical sense, making sure that each section is sort of separated, and then basically trying to very carefully use the object snapping of like the nodes of either lines or boxes to each station box throughout the workflow, if that's what you mean by the process for it.
Does that answer your question, Phil? Yes. Okay. So I don't see any more questions coming up at this point. but you can continue the discussion on the Slack channel, and we will be making these slides available. Zandra will be sharing this with me in a bit, and then I will put it up on Figshare and share it with all of you. So all the resources you have access to as well. Wait a minute, there's just one more question. Yeah, okay, great, good. Right, so again, thanks a lot, Zandra. And we would like to thank the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative for funding the series. We would love to hear from you if you have any ideas for future talks, and hope to see you next week when we have Alex Belzer presenting the first release of pipelines. So see